Because you see, many TriUU members have expressed an interest in learning more about other members. So Helene and Eileen and the worship team decided to build an entire service around that theme. Our first member to share with you this morning is Sarah Reagan.
Well, you look good. I've never seen you from this perspective. Good morning. Well, I was supposed to talk about something that I liked, and I thought about that, and I thought about that, and then I thought, well, maybe you should also talk about something that would be useful for other people. And so I decided to talk about drumming. And just by walking around with that beat, I ran into Peggy, who has drummed. I ran into Joyce, who has been a drummer, and there are probably others of you out there who have drummed at one time or another. Now remember, with drums, these are not like the Edsel. If you remember the Edsel, it showed up and then it was gone. Drumming has been around since roughly 6000 BC. I don't know who wrote that date down, but that's what they suggest. So we've drummed for a long time, and something like that, it would have to be useful for people to keep it going. So I want to talk to you about how drumming can be helpful. I'm mostly talking about drumming circles. Some of this would apply to cardio drumming, but from what I've noticed, that hasn't been researched as well to date as circle drumming has. And what I'm going to mention to you is not just opinion. Opinions are interesting, but I'm really interested in the science behind it. What is the basic data this is based on? Okay, so first, if you're feeling depressed or anxious, drumming seems to help people. And you think, well, why would that be? What it looks like is it raises levels of serotonin and of dopamine. Serotonin, if you've ever taken Prozac, Zoloft, any of those, Celexa, that's all serotonin-based, SSRIs. There's another reason that drumming seems to lead to more feelings of well-being, and that is because it impacts the brain waves. What it will do is suppress beta brain waves, which are those of what's going on. What are you doing here? Who are you? Checking the environment constantly. It suppresses beta waves and enhances alpha waves, which are related to feelings of comfort, feeling at ease. I see my timer. 30 seconds, that's good. So there are reasons why it does that. Now, there's some evidence that drumming is associated with lower BP, blood pressure. Lower blood pressure, I don't really have the data on that, but there's suggestion that it is related to that. Also, there's a little evidence that drumming, really? Wow. Okay, I'll finish that. Drumming related to pain control, and that would probably have to do with endorphins being generated. I was going to talk to you, just so you know, about the social benefits of drumming and about the spiritual benefits of drumming. Drumming is a bridge, I'm leaving, between the physical and the metaphysical, and how does that work? Okay, gang, I enjoyed seeing you. Bye-bye.
Okay. And I think you saw the one that she was carrying around here and playing earlier, which is right up here. And I guess certainly the importance of drumming in music is paramount. If you think of any musical group you've ever seen, from a 2-piece group to a 100-piece group, there are always drums. at the center of it. Little plug there, okay. Next to share with us is Lenore Mickelson. Lenore?
Good morning. I don't have as much history about sewing as Sarah gave us about drumming, but I am sure that it must go back about as far as that. There's evidence of bone needles with holes in them being used, and sinew certainly was used, but I'm a sewist or a quilter, and Helene has some pictures for us. I don't know when she'll put them up. I started sewing when I was 12 and old enough to join my aunt's 4-H sewing group, which is not the same as home ec, but for country kids, 4-H was it. And so I learned to sew, and then I did sew my own clothes until I had enough money to start buying them, and then that was it until I had my daughter. Then I sewed for her, and then I quit again and didn't take it up until I retired and moved to the Southwest, and then decided, because I had neighbors who were quilters, I thought I would give it a try. I don't know what that one is from, but I like it. There should be one more of my quilts to show you. I do enjoy it. I didn't do it while I was caregiving for my husband. There it is. Can you pull that in a little bit more or not? Okay. I made that one for my husband as a gift. It's pictures. You can use any picture and put it on fabric. 8x11 photo on fabric and incorporate it into a quilt. And I did that because we used to camp in the White Mountains of Arizona, which we both loved. And those are scenes and some of my own ideas of what a pine tree looked like on each side. I enjoyed doing that. And I'm picking up quilting some more and hope to have more enjoyment. It's very relaxing. I don't know what else to say. I've never taken up drumming, but I would think it has some of the same benefits. My time.
And the next person to share with us is Cindy Grossman.
Hi, Cindy. Thanks. Give me 1 second before you start that timer, because you know talking for 3 minutes is not one of my fortes. Okay, let me get my props ready. Okay. Good morning. I love to read, and I love literary travel. On a recent trip to London, I walked around Bloomsbury imagining that I was in the footsteps of the writer Virginia Woolf. In Paris, I went to visit the original site of Sylvia Beach's bookstore, where she befriended Hemingway and published the banned book Ulysses by James Joyce. I sat in all of the cafes where Hemingway wrote A Movable Feast, and I visited the graveyard where Jean-Paul Sartre was buried, and his lover, Simone de Beauvoir. In Rome, I lingered in the room overlooking the Spanish Steps, where Keats took his final breath. In Majorca, Spain, I walked through the damp halls of the open-air monastery where George Sand shipped a piano for her young lover, the composer Chopin. Here in the United States, I rocked in the poet's chair where the beat writers gathered at the City Lights bookstore in San Francisco. In Boston, I led my poor sister on a literary walk that included many, many bookstores as we searched for the original site of Elizabeth Peabody's bookstore, where Margaret Fuller had her famous conversations with the women of Boston. When I was young, I recovered from a long illness that forced me to take a semester off from college. I could not travel that summer, but I read most of the published journals of May Sarton, who I quoted in the Chalice opening. Later, when I was married, I told my husband we have to go to York, Maine, where many of her journals were written. And in York, Maine, I picked up this wonderful stone from the beach near her house. On the same trip, I said to my husband, we also have to go to Nelson, New Hampshire, which was where some of the other journals were written. And he says, you're on your own. So I left him swimming and I went to Nelson, New Hampshire, where by myself, I found her house in the town green. And I went to the library across and I says, where would she be buried? She had died 2 weeks before. And they led me to a graveyard, which was up an old dirt road, and I walked up the road by myself about a mile, found the graveyard, and then I was standing there by myself, and I heard rustling in the woods, and a whole flock of sheep came up to greet me. So this is the stone from that. Let me go really quick. This is from her house, actually. Her house was for sale. Before COVID, I went to Concord, Massachusetts, where 4 of us went to a Louisa Alcott's house, Emerson's house, Henry David Thoreau's inn, where we spent the night, a graveyard where he was buried. And I picked this stone off from the graveyard. And I picked this stone from the cool Walden Pond. And every Zoom meeting, I usually take these 2 stones and hold them in my hand because they're at my writing desk, unconsciously searching for the inspiration of a man who believed in civil disobedience and simple living. Excuse me. This is just a sampling of some of the places that I've been. If you have some favorite literary travels, please let me know. Thank you.
There's more sharing to come, don't worry. Continue with our sharing this morning is Trish Schwartzberg.
About 1978 or 79, my daughter was about 5 years old, and my father-in-law came in one Sunday afternoon on our normal Sunday visit and said, "Here, Lori, this is for you. Your mom can put it together." It was a box about that big and about that thick. It was a dollhouse. A year and a half later, I finished the dollhouse, many hours and much money to make that cheap little dollhouse look like something. At that time, my daughter and I started to look for furniture to put in it. And again, because she was young, we had to do things that were fairly sturdy and that she could play with. But I started noticing how out of proportion and how out of style for that time the furniture pieces you could find were. I enjoyed modern type furniture, so I started making things. I joined a miniature club in Atlanta, and then I started taking some classes and learning how to do a few things, and then taught myself a lot more. After a while, I started to show some of my pieces and went to miniature shows where I was able to sell and get a wider audience. I had a couple of articles written about my pieces. I joined NAME, N-A-M-E, which is the National Association of Miniature Enthusiasts. That was all in the US. And I also joined IGMA, International Guild of Miniature Enthusiasts, which gave juried shows once a year in New York. And luckily enough, my pieces, I had to send them pieces and tell them about them. And then I got judged and I was given a little certificate, you can see it up here, that says I was an artisan with the IGMA. And so I started going, I went to 2 of their shows in New York, which were held in the World Trade Center. One of the times I was there was the year before the first bomb that was in the basement of the towers was put off. And I was just like, oh my gosh, do I really want to go back there? But that's in the past. So what I have left now, I don't do them anymore because the eyesight is not as good as it was. The hands are not as steady as they were. But at that time, I just loved looking at finding contemporary. Most everything you could find was Victorian or country or Quaker or something like that. Nothing, very, very little contemporary furniture. So I started looking, got interested in a man named Sam Malouf, who there's a little chair here that, and the cradle are both copied from pieces that he made. And I tried to do that. I saw actual pieces in progress and tried to copy the joinery that he used as well as the way he shaped things. Now, one of his things was that he would take the picture of the back of the person for his rockers, which I don't have a rocker here. There was one in one of the pictures, and fit it to the person that he was making it for so that it would fit their back properly when they sat in it. And there was a chair of his in the White House that John Kennedy used because he had back problems and it fit his back perfectly. So, as with many hobbies, turning them into a business doesn't really work. The pay for your time is minuscule. The rocker, for example, I timed myself one time and it took me about 50 hours to make it from start to finish. And I started with a flat piece of wood, cut out all the pieces and put them together and then finished it. So you're welcome to come up and look at this after the service. And you saw the pictures that were on here. If you have any questions, let me know.
And if we're ready with Zoom back there, our final share this morning, coming to us online, is Claire Hunter.
Hello, everybody. Zoom is a wonderful feature because it brings us right together. I'm very happy to be a part of this program, and even though I'm not present there. I only look white. He's black. So are the kids. I went black at 12. When I was 13, 12 or 13, I had just left elementary school or whatever, right around there. And that was the early 60s. And it turned out that it was a very much of a turning point for me. What happened was in the 50s, 54 was the end of segregation. I mean, according to the school boards and whatnot, but because busing started as forced busing, and this was how they envisioned people would be now integrated. But that really didn't work so well. But I was growing up in New York City, in Queens, the what was then, and probably for much longer, the most diverse county. And I'm talking about the world. We had all kinds of people coming from so many places, and it was a wonderful place to be. But at that time, in elementary school, I was growing up in a white town, which was Richmond Hill. Well, we were a couple of us were offered the opportunity to go to a magnet school. The next school would be a magnet school, and that was something that New York City decided to do, and it was make magnets out of various schools, and that was to encourage people from around the city to go to a school that was offering a program that might be a little different, and it would be attractive and draw people from around the area. In looking back at it, that was their version of busing. It was their version of integrating the people with a nice feeling. Well, I accepted the invitation. Only 3 of us from our class of 25 accepted the invitation. And pardon? Oh, and so what happened was I had been being um, bullied in my junior school with all the white people. And when I went to this black school, I didn't know how I would be accepted. And I can tell you, I went in a very nervous way. And the first fellow that I met, he just smiled and said hello. And I just came to be so comfortable. And that was my turning to realize people. And then for the rest of my life, I was open. I was basically open. And I love wearing my t-shirt, black mixed with blah, 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 but mainly black. I just wear that when I go to the first time I wore it, I went to Walmart and a black lady said to me, like your t-shirt. And that was really nice to have. So anyway, now my husband, Danny, and he's been wonderful. Thank you to all.
Well, we promised you a little later on a very special breakfast this morning. And here is Chef Sonya to explain what she and Corinne are making for us.
Good morning, good morning. All right, this morning we'll be introducing you to our Jamaican cuisine. We have ackee and saltfish, which is the national dish of Jamaica. We have fried dumplings, plantains, green and ripe. So we'll show you the difference between them. And we have a treat of Jamaican fruitcake. So enjoy. Thank you.
Yeah, Mom, we will.